VP of Sustainability at EcoLab. Welcome, Emilio.
Thanks for having me.
So, Emilio, I think the question here, and they saw the panel up there earlier, but just to dive a little deeper, why is water so important in a broader sustainability context?
Yeah, so every aspect of the economy has a connection to water. Whether you're a restaurant, a hospital, a food maker, or even a steel mill, you are connected with water and delivering that product and service to their customers. And so it really drives our economy. The challenge, however, is that the UN has identified that by 2030 there'll be a 40% fresh water supply and demand gap, which is obviously very challenging. And so more than ever, businesses and industry and communities are looking for ways to not only conserve, but think about water, rethink the way they use water in a way to reuse and recycle water more than ever.
So we were talking earlier today at a lunch, and you bring up the concept of circular water management. So what does that mean? There haven't been a lot of definitions of it, so where do you see it?
Yeah, of course, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has done a wonderful job of really developing core principles for circular economy. And when it comes to materials, that's great, but when it comes to water being very localized, and so one watershed is going to have very different circular requirements than another. And so for us, I think it's incumbent on us to really start to shape a definition that does take that into account, that not only looks at reuse, recycle, and conservation, which is the very first step, but also do it in a way that we think of quantity, quality, and I'll call it value. Because when you look at an operation for a business like Intel or Ford Motor Company, they're really focused on how water is put to work within their operations. And so what may be a waste stream from one unit operation might be a feed stream to another. So we need to start thinking of this cascading flow of water in a plant so we can maximize how we close the loop in that situation.
So we heard some pretty scary stories over lunch talking about what happened in South Africa. Do you see that driving more interest in companies around having to set goals and targets for water use and reuse?
Yes, hopefully more proactively, right? So it's been very reactive up to this point, and I really believe that the GreenBiz survey that we did a year ago suggests that of 184 companies that were surveyed, 75% of them indeed had water-related targets, and it was a priority, which is good. The challenge was that really only 20% of them had the resources and tools to get it done. And so I think it's incumbent on industry to really begin to create a water strategy that not only takes into account an enterprise level view, but also a localized view in water-stressed areas like Cape Town. And we have been working on a publicly available tool that we want to launch next year that looks at this maturity curve, because you have to know where you are first and then move and map out a plan to get to this better place. And going back to our previous question, really we think that's an area called In the Blue, which is about becoming more circular. And it doesn't mean zero liquid discharge, because that might not be cost effective, but it's really about identifying ways that you can minimally discharge fresh water, take less fresh water in, and maximize the way you use water and put it to work in your plant.
And you mentioned a tool that you're going to release sometime next year, but there are some tools that have already been released.
Yes.
So what are those, and how have you seen the uptake?
Well, EcoLab has developed and released some publicly available tools that are free of charge that anyone, industry, agriculture, any water user around the world can leverage. The Water Risk Monetizer, we're in version 3, and we're looking at version 4 in 2020. That was a collaboration between EcoLab, TrueCost, and Microsoft. And that opportunity really was to think of a way to look at quantity and quality at an operational level, but not only to quantify the risk, but to monetize it and put it in business terms so that people can really get insights to take action at that local level.
So are you seeing conversations people are having with their financial people, CFOs, or is it with risk management? Where are those conversations occurring in companies?
All of the above, from the bottled water companies to the large paper makers. There is conversations where it's about identifying the risk first and foremost. Where are my high risk hotspot sites around the world or in a region? How do I ID opportunities to take action within that site once I've found that hotspot? And then third is, how do I value risk into my decisions? And so we developed the Water Risk Monetizer to really think of a risk premium, just like a finance person would think of the weighted average cost of capital, where you discount things like supply risk or political unrest. These are all factors that need to be discounting the decisions that we're making around water and how we manage it more responsibly.
So I think one other thing is, you've mentioned several times around watersheds and that. So are you seeing any good practices around how people can collaborate? Because you can't be a single company in a watershed and claim ownership.
Right.
So how do cities and corporations, NGOs work together to help a watershed?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think that's at the heart of this because, we often say that we need to have the foresight to do this work around circular water management. That means the digital enablement and technologies like you heard earlier today, like 3D Trace are. Then you also have to have the sense of urgency. The third is, I think, collaboration. It's how do you begin to come together with other stakeholders in a watershed to really begin to think beyond just the fence line, outside the fence line to drive collective action. One example of that, I think, here in California is the California Water Action Collaborative, or QUAC as we like to refer to it. It's a great acronym. But that is a cluster of not only food and beverage companies, which there are a lot of in the Santa Ana watershed, but and EcoLab has 2 facilities there, by the way. We are all collaborating in that watershed really with one common goal, is that all of us together, our incremental inputs can lead to a greater impact overall versus all of us doing our own thing.
Oh, that's great. Well, we've been here chatting with Emilio Tenuta, Vice President of Sustainability at EcoLab. Thanks, Emilio.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we're going to go from water to energy, so stay tuned after this break.